timekeeper. We must have courage. Courage to recognize that the war on drugs has failed. Courage to recognize that we are fighting and losing a war that in its principal objectives limits autonomy and that in its practical outcomes devastates communities and countries. And that is why we believe that abandoning the battles means winning the war. What do we define this motion as? By the war on drugs, we refer to an international offensive to combat recreational drug use. It includes regulations to ban recreational drugs like marijuana, or even harder drugs like heroin and crack cocaine. There are customs enforcement operations to prevent drug smuggling, and often involves the use of armies and militaries to actually fight drug gangs with multiple agencies, like the International Agency Against Drugs or the UN Commission on Drugs. Annually, it costs hundreds of billions of dollars. Second, what do we mean by the international community? We refer quite clearly, no thank you, to governments and their subsidiary anti-drug agencies, as well as international bodies like the United Nations and the bodies they have to combat drugs. What is our policy? First, we would legalize all drugs across a spectrum, ranging from soft drugs like marijuana to hard drugs like meth. We think state-approved production and distribution centers will sell these drugs together with clean syringes to ensure safety. And we would not place limits on drug consumption. Second, obviously, we will continue to criminalize gang activity and illegal drug distribution, which involves violence. The resources saved by our policy will go into combating any black market in drugs, although we think our policy will significantly reduce that black market. Third, we support comprehensive education campaigns and pamphlets in schools, workplaces, or public spaces so that individuals are fully aware of the harms that drugs may cause. Moreover, we think health advisory information will be readily available at all places where you can purchase drugs. Fourth, we would make drug rehabilitation as accessible and affordable as possible. We have free counseling centers at every distribution center and fully subsidized rehabilitation programs using the money we save from fighting the war on drugs. We have three arguments. First, that we uphold individual autonomy. Second, that the war on drugs has done more harm than good. And third, that we better protect drug users. First argument on individual autonomy. We think because taking drugs is a legitimate choice, we must stop the war to prevent people from doing so. Why do we have autonomy and choice? We have autonomy and choice because really nobody else knows what it is like to be me. We have a quality of human experience where nobody else, no thank you, can understand our subjective human experiences in the same way that any individual can. And this means that only I know the costs and benefits and how a particular action is going to affect me. We think there is no objective good a state can foist upon an individual because every individual and every human experience is subjective. Why is taking drugs therefore a legitimate choice? Because we very often sacrifice bits of our future choices in every case all the time. We will never have perfect information as to what it's going to be like, but we think that's fine. This happens with fast food when we let you take it, even though you don't know what it's like to have cancer 20 years down the line. This happens with chain smoking, hold on a moment. This happens when you go for a major surgery, when you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we let you take that choice anyway. We think drugs are the same. Before I move on to explain why, yes?
The problem is that in the moment in which you take drugs, you also affect other people by criminality rate, by the fact that you are less efficient in the society, and so on and so forth.
We think this criminality rate arises because drugs are illegal. That is why crime is being raised because of the war on drugs. We remove that war on drugs, we stop this idea of criminality that you propound. Back to my case. So let's examine why drugs fit this legitimate choice along a spectrum. Let's begin with soft drugs, like marijuana and cannabis. I think for marijuana and cannabis, they are less damaging to your body than alcohol, and they are less addictive to you than nicotine. We don't see why this is we think the reason for this, because they work along with dopamine receptors. The same receptors you use for sugar. We don't think these are significantly addictive, no thank you. Neither are they significantly harmful to your body. That's why many states actually already legalize marijuana and cannabis. But okay, what about hard drugs? The ones that they may want to talk about a bit more. We think even in these cases, first of all, they are still less damaging to your body than many other things we allow you to do, like a lifetime of eating fast food. More importantly, we think you retain large aspects of your autonomy even in the future, even if you are taking these drugs, even if they like to claim that you are addicted. Why? Because yes, there are incredible highs when you take these drugs, but there are also moments of clarity. There are moments when you understand what you're doing and you can weigh up that option of whether to continue or whether to seek help. We think the very fact that individuals often choose to seek help when they believe themselves to be taking more heroin than they want, no thank you, is evident of the fact that people are not slaves to these drugs. Therefore, because we uphold individual autonomy, because drugs do not make you a slave, we must abandon the war on drugs. No thank you. Second argument, why the war on drugs has done more harm than good. So even if drugs are an illegitimate choice, the fact that the war against them has done more harm than good means we must abandon it. We think it's very clear that we have lost the war on drugs. There has been a 1/3 increase in the amount of crack cocaine entering the United States since the war on drugs began, despite the fact that we have spent $1 trillion trying to prevent this. Why? Because people still want to buy drugs, because borders are porous, and because what you do now essentially is allow criminal gangs to have a monopoly on an industry that is worth $300 billion a year. How does this affect different countries? Let's look first at developing countries, very often the sources of these drugs. We think drug money therefore funds criminal gangs and massive criminal syndicates that eventually start controlling huge portions of your country. Why? Because this money goes to funding weapons. It goes to funding organizations that are used to military applications which your military might not even have. That's why in Brazil they discovered narco submarines owned by drug gangs that the Colombian military didn't even have access to that sort of technology themselves. How does this manifest in real life? It means that in Mexico, the entire state of Nicaraguan, the northern half of Mexico, is controlled by the Knights Templar, a drug gang controlling that state using drug money. It means that 500,000 people in Mexico have died since the war on drugs began due to drug-related violence because of these gangs and because of the money you are pumping into them when you make it illegal. Why is our side better? We are better because when you abandon the war on drugs, when you legalize these drugs, people are much more likely to buy drugs from legal sources. Why? Because first of all, people don't like to break the law and risk going to jail. Second of all, because legal sources are probably a lot safer for them and they're more likely to look after their health. What you do therefore is you remove the funding of these gangs and therefore their ability to keep combating states in the way that they do now. Second, because you remove their institutional capacity as major institutions within your society, you prevent the Zetas or the methylene cartels from basically controlling half of Mexico. That's for developing countries. For developed countries, we think this argument is even clearer. Why? When drug use is illegal right now, it means that people who take drugs, who are able to access drugs because of the porous borders I talked about, aren't able to seek help. They aren't able to go to rehab centers. They aren't able to ask people for counseling. Because if they do so, then they have committed a crime, they'll be sent to jail, as happens in the United States of America. Our policy is better. Why? Because when we legalize drugs, first of all, these people can seek. Second of all, this help will be there for them because we have the resources to build rehab centers and counseling for them, which their side does not have. For these reasons, we must abandon the war on drugs.